So I want to tell you a story in the Seinfeld mode about nothing. But I think it's important. And I sort of take a risk of losing all of you by telling this story, but it's okay. It truly is about nothing. It goes back a little over 2 weeks ago, and I'm having oral surgery, replacing some bone graft in my jaw. And I'm having nitrous oxide, which I've done on occasion in the dentist office. And I have to say, most of the time I've had nitrous oxide, it's very, what I call affirming. It's so psychedelic on some level. It kind of takes you up into much of the kind of experience that we have here in class. Very, very warm, embracing, timeless, without body, without pain, kind of a remarkable place. And any of you who've had nitrous oxide probably are familiar with it. But in this particular instance, the nitrous didn't seem to be working. So the dentist says, well, I'm cranking it up as far as I'm legally allowed to go. I said, okay. And he said, take a few deep breaths, and I did. And the next thing I know, I'm on what feels like my LSD journey from 50 years ago. It is so huge, so vast, so out of body, so timeless, so in many ways remarkable. But its primary aspect was, one, that it was completely impersonal, that it had absolutely no interest in who I am or who I was or anything about the life journey that has been lived in the last 50 years. It was exceedingly mechanistic and numerical, or code-like, computer-like. And I have to say, something in me was not happy about it, or didn't like it. It was so dismissive of 50 years of spiritual practice, of all of the journey that has unfolded for me over the course of time. It was like nothing had happened in 50 years. And I was just back into this place of transcendent, impersonal, timeless nothingness. Although it wasn't, for me at that point, nothing. It was very much computer code. And usually with nitrous oxide, when it's over, they flush you with oxygen and they clean this out of your system. And then you come back and you're like, oh yeah, oh that. But for some reason, they just took off my mask. So I was in a place of computer code and then back right here. And all of this reconstructed itself instantaneously into solid matter. And I was nauseous at the core. And I was like, oh, it's like my whole life just collapsed inside me. Everything I knew, everything I thought I knew, everything I cared about suddenly was reduced to some kind of unknowable computerized something. And I thought, now what? Now what? It was so, in a way, a betrayal of everything I thought that I taught, everything that we talk about here, everything that I cared about. It kind of dismissed the amount of love I had in my life as just computer code. Every one of my connections to people were just computerized. By that I mean, let me just put it more succinctly, although it's hard to be succinct about it. It was that all of matter progressed from zeros and ones, or 0, 1. it just builds up into this. I don't know who started the process, or how it started, or why it started, or what it's for, or why it came about. And I just felt, now how do I continue? How do I continue my teaching? How do I continue what my life has been built upon? The 50 years of trying to discover what this was about. I know right after LSD, I immediately got a hold of the Bhagavad Gita. My friend Barry gave it to me, the same guy who gave me LSD. And he said, read this. And I read the Bhagavad Gita and I went, oh, this is what all that's about. It's this extraordinary teaching of metaphysical truth, as the Hindus described it in their religion. And it's like I said at the time, had I read this the day before LSD, I would have understood nothing. The day after, I understood everything. And I immediately formed a conception of the universe that was driven by a larger mystical understanding. And I got to put everything in play. And then I discovered Buddhism. And I discovered mystical theology in Christianity, in Judaism, and in the Islamic faith. All of those started to speak to me, and they all started to say that they all came from the same basic understanding that I had had on LSD, that was essentially now being codified into something that had worldly expression, the teachings of mysticism. And these mystical teachings were the only grounding I had for this strange, bizarre, unexplainable, ineffable knowing. And so I began to pursue this lineage, and I started to travel. I wanted to live with Tibetan Buddhists. I wanted to find other people who could teach me the Zen teachings. I went to India. I tried to find out what all these people knew that I now needed to know to bring into the system so that I could function in the world. And it was such a beautiful series of teachings, of transcendent teaching, that at the core of everything is love, or in a way, consciousness. And then Rudy would say to me, and a lot of these teachings will say this as well, at the core of everything is nothing. Which, for me, became a nothingness filled with the feeling of love, or embrace, or mother's milk, kindness, whatever you want it to be. And so I came away from this nitrous oxide experience with the air punched out of me. And I went, that's not what it felt like. It didn't feel like there was any love. It didn't feel like there was any higher consciousness. It didn't feel like there was any particular purpose. It just felt like code. I know that's an odd word, or ones and zeros. And so the last 2 weeks have been really a struggle for me in a profound way, because I wondered, first of all, can I teach? Can I sit down and teach? What would I teach? How do I even express this? And I felt I can't. So I first taught in LA just 2 days after this experience, and I was amazed to sit down. And first of all, a lot of new people came, like 9 new people came, and I didn't know why. And the class was dense with people. And and I sat down, and I automatically and immediately arrived at what I have known for years now, is this state of, I can only call it beauty and wonder and love and joy and bliss and truth. It just, there it was. Even with the computer stuff, there was this thing. And I started looking at people and connecting. And this thing expanded, as it always does. And it grew, and it communicated, and it connected. And it was remarkable. And then there was this talk after class, and a talk came out. And I never planned these things. They just happen. And it came out just like it normally did. And I went, It's so interesting, because this code, or whatever this thing is broadcasting itself as whatever it is that's happening between us. And it felt as rich and full and beautiful and meaningful as it ever had. But then, when the class was over, I started to get very withdrawn and sort of depressed. And it wasn't, I can't call it Bruce depression, because the Bruce character is not so present at this point. What's really present is a kind of, I call it the absolute, but it's like human life is present. Human existence is present. And I'm in the Motion Picture Academy, and so I get to watch all of the movies that have come out at the end of the year so I can vote. And they send you everything, and I kind of am responsible in my mind to do this thing appropriately. So I watch all the movies, and suddenly I'm at the foreign films, which are films that would never play in America, ever. They are heavy and real world and dense and full of human suffering. And I watched one called Leviathan, the Russian film, and it was like the nitrous oxide made visible. It was so awful. It was so betrayal. Everything in it was human beings betraying each other. Society was betraying people, the laws were betraying people, individuals were betraying people, and ultimately the church was betraying people. And I'm watching this, feeling like it's just magnifying this thing that's going on inside me. It's so powerful, so distasteful. I almost tried to turn it off at one point, but then I said, no, stay with it. And at one point, the priest in the show started talking about Leviathan. Leviathan is a name for the unknowable in the Bible, the unknowable truth. And I kept going, yes, that's exactly what I'm touching. It is the absolute unknowable. It is so beyond that nothing can get to it. Nothing. No part of our mind, no part of our experience can grasp what it is that we are or that we're in. And it was so phenomenal that he was giving voice to that. But what's happening to me much in the last few years, and particularly even more so now, everything speaks to me. Everything that arises has content. Everything. And I'm so attuned to human life in a way that human suffering now for me has become personal. It's no longer, it's not mine, it's not Bruce's, it's ours. It's human life is as Buddha said, it's suffering. And yes, that's really what it is, and there's no way to be one with all of this and not to experience it. But it's not just suffering. It has so many other aspects to it, so many other qualities, including love and kindness and compassion and all of these issues. But I've started finding that I didn't trust anything. I couldn't trust anything, including my own belief system. And I got really lost inside, and I started to feel this darkness taking over, this wild depression. And it wasn't, again, personal. It was impersonal depression. It was like heavy weight. And then the words, the dark night of the soul, came back to me. And I've had dark nights of the soul before. I suspect you all have, and if you haven't, they will probably come. It's not a given, but it comes a lot in spiritual practice. And so I was on my computer. I was looking at something, I don't remember what, and there was Dark Night of the Soul. And it was a talk that Adyashanti, I don't know if you know Adyashanti, but he's a wonderful exponent of non-dualism and Advaita Yoga, which is what we are basically doing here. And I really love his teachings. And there was a talk that I had acknowledged. I had never downloaded it, but I had saved it somewhere, and there it was. So I said, okay, let's listen to this talk. And I did, and it was really helpful, really helpful. And it was helpful because he started talking about the dark night of the soul that happens after awakening. He said there were various stages of dark night, but one of them really occurs after you've already awakened to reality and truth. And I was like, I never would have imagined that. And it came at me so strongly. And what it gave me was, it allowed me to go through it or to be in it. and not to feel that I was a completely failed whatever I am, teacher, student, presence. I just said okay to this. And as the week went on, these strange things happened. I talked to a very dear friend, and he said to me that he had a teacher once, an awakened guy, supposedly, who said to him, in the end, it's all ones and zeros. And I went, oh, yes, in the end, it's all ones and zeros. So I had confirmation that I wasn't the only one who thought in this way. Then I had another friend who talked to me who was very honest and unpleasant, but said to me, you have to understand that you've exhibited this stink of awakening. I'm so sick of your talking about awakening and your idea of presence and spirituality. And he was really offended by it, primarily because he felt that I had separated from him and from everybody else by having an awakening. And I kept trying to say, no, it's the exact opposite. You don't separate from anybody. It's a linking up with everybody. But anyway, these things, I was being battered by all of these different forces and kind of stuff clarifying at the same time. And then I had lunch with my son Joshua the other day, and we were sitting, and I had not expressed all of this journey to him. And so I was telling him what was going on, and he was, as always, just very open and receptive. And I kind of started to express this idea that even computer code is a story. It's just a way of identifying something in terms that the mind can hold on to. And that even that wasn't true. And I started to realize that nothing is true. Nothing. Anything we believe at all isn't. It does. Everything you believe, let me put it this way, will be lost. Every belief system you hold on to in life ultimately does not hold up to the Leviathan, or whatever it is that is this ultimate thing. It all disappears. Everything turns to nothing. And I mean nothing. Which means your highest belief system, the greatest truth that you know, has to be abandoned. Or not willingly perhaps, but it will be taken away. I don't care how beautiful and pristine and absolute and wonderful it is. I don't care how high your enlightenment, how high your awakening. In the end, if there's such a thing, it all boils down to nothing. Period. And you don't even know what you're holding on to until you start to know that it's nothing. It's not there. On the other hand, Jerry Seinfeld did a show about nothing, and we laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed at nothing. And we spent all of our lives totally invested in the drama of nothing. It doesn't add up to anything. It will not, in the end, make you more adorable to that which is, or more lovable, or more hateful, probably. You are what you are. It is an explainable truth. I mean, when I say truth now, you have to know it's just my expression of what I think of as truth. There is within manifested reality, which comes out of unmanifested nothingness, there are rules and laws and aspects of being that have truth in the moment, because we feel them. There is love, and I guess hatred. There is goodness and evil. There are light and dark. All of these things, the ones and zeros, if you will, which I use now to explain this, which is also untrue, because computer ones and zeros doesn't get at it really. But there is this form that it's taken, and we're in it. We are in it. Not only are we in it, we're of it. We are the thing that's happening. And we're all one thing that's happening. We're also not happening on some level, but why go there? Because that doesn't help. What helps is when you sit still, when you let go of actively engaging the world, this thing starts to happen, which is beautiful, real, true, expansive, vast, simple, joyful, spaceless, timeless being. That's what you find. That emerges before form. Out of this simple consciousness, which comes out of nothingness, arises form and us. And we can get caught in the manifestation in all different kinds of ways, and when you do get caught in it, it's uncomfortable. It's really painful. And it's also limited in duration, so everything you acquire in it, everything you believe in, is ultimately taken away. Knowing that brings you into a state of stillness, of meditation, of openness, of awakening, of enlightenment to the fact that this is all nothing. And in that nothingness are these amazing things arising, like, in my case, my wife, my children, my grandchildren, my friends, you, a really nice house, a view, rain in a place that needs it, a kind of simple kindness, a joy. It's only here for this moment. I can't talk about the next moment because none of us know it. But I know this moment is enriched by that, and I also know it doesn't have any ultimate existence, which makes it unbearably precious. Because it makes no sense. It makes no sense that this is happening at all. And if you try to have it make sense, it will be a story you're telling yourself. If you tell yourself that there's an ultimate anything here, you're going to be lying to yourself. Because everything that you think of as ultimate, like ultimate truth, ultimate joy, will all go away because it's nothing. Everything, and I mean everything, goes. But it's okay, and it's okay because we come from nothing. So we just return to what we are. It's okay. So you're here for whatever reason. It's up to you to make of it what you will. Yes, there are rules and laws, and they're strong ones. I was telling someone today, you cannot go into the bank and take its money at gunpoint. There will be consequences to doing that. Everything has rules and consequences, and many of those rules are set out in the Ten Commandments. They're very simple. Don't covet your neighbor's wife, don't steal, don't kill. Simple rules. If you break those rules, there are consequences in this form. I don't know where those arose from. They have biblical aspects, so clearly they go back to old storytelling. Bible is very old storytelling. Buddhism is old storytelling. Christianity is old, relatively old. We're just talking thousands of years here. It's nothing compared to the existence of the world. But these are stories that we have been told. We have embraced some of these stories, some of us with enormous belief. My nephew was here last week. It's wonderful. I love him. But we're a Jewish family, and he is the only one who became evangelical Christian. And he has enormous need to share his Christianity with the family, and mostly the family goes, please don't share that with us. It's a sad thing. I, on the other hand, love Jesus, and so I am very open to his dialogue. And we went out to dinner the other night, and it was so beautiful. And I was talking about this dark night of the soul and how I could just, reach out and grab my granddaughter in this or my grandson, and there was always this thing of love that I had. Love gave it meaning and value, and as long as I could hold on to love, I could defeat the darkness. And he said, no, 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 no. He said, those are temporal forms. You can't hold on to temporal forms. They won't do it for you. The only thing you can hold on to is Christ, which is eternal. And he started to talk to me, and the beauty in his voice, his sense of having found the very thing that would save him. That's wrong to think that I say would, because he felt saved in a way. He had found the story that redeemed him in every possible way. It was so beautiful to hear him say it. But then, as this week went on, and all of this stuff has been moving around for me, I realized it's still another story. It's another story. It's a beautiful story. And he will live a better life because of that story. He will be a better human being. He will have this sense of always having this blessed truth in his life. Even though it may not be the truth, it is a truth that works. We all have our truths. A lot of us think, oh, love is everything. And as long as we have love or consciousness or Buddha or whatever, we're connected to truth. And I'm here to tell you, no. No, I don't care how beautiful the story is. No. It's a temporary story. I don't care whether it's my granddaughter or Jesus or Buddha or Moses or whatever. It will all go in the end, and you will watch it go like that because the story goes before your consciousness goes. There will be conscious awareness as everything disintegrates, I believe. Look, if I'm wrong, great. But you will watch everything you believe disintegrate, and a part of you will either go yes or no to that. That's kind of what it comes down to in the end. You either go goodbye or don't go, holding or letting go. That's, this whole practice is called letting go or surrender. That's really what it's about. It's learning what Rudy called the muscle of surrender. Learning to let go has great value, particularly in the last moments of your life when you really have to do it. But it really has great value throughout your life because so much of what we hold on to isn't real. And it causes us suffering. We keep thinking, if I can just keep driving that car another year, my beautiful car, I'll be happy. Well, of course you can't. Your car's going to break down. If my dog will only live another year, if my mother will only live, or whatever your things are that you're holding on to, it's all going to not work. It's not going to work. And you may find like the perfect philosophy. And even that will not work. What works in the end is what it is. It's just what it is. And so stop getting in the way of what is and just be whatever you are now. But what choice do you have? It's not like you're going to choose to be this. You are this. This is what you are. Right at this very moment is what you are. And this teaching would say to you, you are perfect as you are. Not that you're free of illusion and story and everything else. You're just this. And we have no idea how it's going to unfold or where it's going to go. And we will tell our stories about how it's going to go and how it unfolds. And it's really interesting. All of my friends who are now entering their 70s and retired, every one of us, our stories are shifting so dramatically. If people you thought were your friends suddenly aren't so much your friends. Suddenly the goals of your life that motivated you for your all of your early midlife years and middle years all kind of fall away. It's like none of that means anything anymore. As you start to move toward the end, it's like you look back and you go, what was that? And it's really interesting because it's all stories. And they're all falling away, and the story that remains at the end is very simple. Voltaire said, let your garden grow, make your garden grow. It kind of comes down to working in the garden. Like a lot of old people, that's what they do, because that's what you have left. Like I was telling a friend today, I don't need to go to Paris. I don't need to go to another museum. I don't need to go out to an expensive meal. None of these are going to add up anymore. What I need, what I want, is really simple. And it gets simpler and simpler and simpler until it's over. So the ultimate statement, which is kind of what I keep coming at week after week after week, only now for me much more clarified on some level, is that it's your game. You make of this what you will. If you take a deep breath every day and you sit still and you find presence in yourself, you will find yourself one with whatever is happening. If you get knotted up and contentious and angry and disapproving and all of that stuff, you will be in the same ball game, but you're not going to be a happy player. You will be a very unhappy participant in this game, and you have a choice. That's what I talked about last week. Take a breath. Find that restorative space inside yourself, the space of expansion. Go in there, and it's amazing what you get. Even in this material world, there is a doorway into infinite and expansive consciousness. The Leviathan of a human existence will never be known. The what is can only be experienced, but you can never know it. The effort to put it together in some way that makes you believe in it is just an effort that you've chosen to believe in. And it's all going to go foo. So it's wonderful to have a meditative life and a spiritual life and a belief system and hopes and ambitions and a sense of what happens when you die or what happens, when you win the Oscar, or all these things that make people feel they're going to find happiness and truth and ultimate anything. Nope. Not true. Or maybe true, and I still have further to go in the journey. And if I do find anything else to report back on, I will do that if anybody's sitting here at that point. Maybe there will be nobody sitting here because nobody wants to hear this is about nothing. But I don't know what else to say, honestly. And so maybe I'll just now shut up. Any questions?
I had a sense the other day that I am living like a virtual reality. And like when I'm in my head and thinking that I might as well be, I don't know, in one of those, in a video game or something. Exactly what it felt like to me. The nitrous this was a virtual reality. Yeah.
And I kept going, well, who made it? Who created this reality? And I keep thinking some 10-year-old somewhere in 1 billion years from here created this thing and we're in it. And it just started happening and it's still going and he's looking at it like, what did I do? And what is it? I mean, it's a horrible way of reducing this into something really meaningless, of something that somebody just started, like SimCity or some other game that's on a computer, and we're part of that. It's an explanation, in truth.
Right. But what I thought got me out of that was connecting with somebody else, and now it's not. I'm not in my mind, or I'm not in my ego, or I'm not. I'm actually.
Right. Connection is really meaningful and really valuable, but it's not the ultimate story. I don't want to say it's a virtual reality because I think that's just another story, and it's another way for us to look at it. Mm-hmm. But it has more virtual aspect than we understand.
Yeah.
And connecting to another, at least we feel whole because we're all one projection. We're all one presence. And when you have somebody else mirroring that, you feel the joy of whatever love brings about, whatever childbearing brings about, whatever gift friendship brings about. It's so vital. That's why we seek relationships so much, although it's so hard to have relationship. But when two people connect, especially in this mechanism, because we're connecting without personality, story, it's just one being to another being and realizing there isn't so much other. It's just one being. That is unbelievably edifying in some very fundamental way. And it's something we can hold on to until they take you out of here. And then all the people holding your hand and rubbing your forehead at that moment isn't going to really take care of it. I mean, it makes you feel better for as you're leaving, but ultimately it's just whatever you think you are returning to oneness, returning to the totality. I think, if there's totality to return to, but again, that's spiritual talk. Maybe we're just returning to nothing. And what does that mean?
I was thinking or hoping that awakening got me out of the virtual reality.
It kind of does on one level, but it doesn't on another. It gets you out of your virtual reality into the larger virtual reality, which is this thing that's happening, which, those of us who have cable news, Eric and I were talking about this before, opens it up to a particular kind of world view that we didn't have 1,000 years ago, where reality was a very small, contained thing, and stories were told by wandering people who told stories, but they weren't even written down. Nowadays, we're full of stories, we're full of worldview, we're full of vast perspective, but that reality that we're seeing is really complicated and difficult in many ways. And so finding this spaciousness in yourself is a way of dealing with presence and what is, without having it impacted by all of the knowledge, brain cell activity that we are exposed to. And it's a relief to have that. It's not wrong to be aware of that stuff, but it is a relief not to be in it all the time, because when you are in it, it's so painful usually. Occasionally it's uplifting, occasionally it's sweet, occasionally it makes you laugh, but mostly it's hard stuff. And the fact of human life is that, one, it gets more painful in terms of physical experience, and it becomes something that ultimately you're going to leave behind. So that has its own grieving quality and attachment qualities and all these issues that we deal with. The only peace one can find in the middle of all that is, and this thing comes over you, and it's kind of thy will be done, where you just go, okay, yes. And the great saints, that's what they do. They just sit around and go, here we are. And they laugh sometimes, and they cry, and they're there, and they're part of being, but they're not at odds with it. They're just allowing it. They don't even allow, because allowing means you're doing something. You're just there. It's just happening. And that we're all exactly that. It's just most people you meet don't know that, and so they're very caught up in their drama and their this and their that. And you get to this place of nothingness, and you look at everybody's drama, and you go, what can you say? What can you even say to anybody? How do you begin that dialogue to say, get over it? I mean, it's not real. You can't say that to people. Sitting around banging at the same wound over and over and over and over and reinforcing it and crusting over and being miserable and horrible. And you go, there's nothing here. Watch TV, relax, go for a walk, have a milkshake, do something that gives you some kind of joy in being. Or just sit absolutely still and see that none of this has real content. It's very temporal. It arises and it goes away. It rises and it goes away. Every second. And if you get really quiet, there's the underlying truth in which it arises, or the underlying consciousness, or sense of being, or reality, whatever you want to call it, that's there. And then we tell ourselves that will be there forever. I think that's still a story. I don't know. We'll find out. But I do know that we are responsible, meaning responsive, to stimuli. And that responsiveness to stimuli is something we can weave together this way or that way. Artists do it this way, Soldiers do it this way. I'm stereotyping, but people find their own way of weaving this together. If you've been raised with a screaming, yelling family, you probably will create more screaming, yelling families, or you will say, I don't ever want that again, and you become deeply peaceful. Everybody has their journey and how they react to all of this input. And what you get is what you get. And does the universe care? Kind of not. The only thing that cares is you. And so make it a life that you're happy with. And you can't have all the circumstances under your control. You may not have enough money. You may not have the house you want. You may not have the things you want. But what do you have? Well, figure it out. You have a breath. You have eyes. You have a body that still maybe functions for you. You have the world around you. you have stuff that if you get to a really simple place, you can see as beautiful or awful. I mean, however you want to look at it. You may have horrible circumstance. That happens to a lot of people. You're living in Nigeria, you're living in Syria. Horrible, horrible circumstance. What does that do? I'm not there. I've been watching movies. God knows these Academy movies are, you want to blow your brains out kind of, because they're so terribly disturbing. On the other hand, what you keep seeing in these movies of despair are people who look through it, who find themselves in it, literally find themselves, and they know truth or beauty or meaninglessness or nothingness while it's happening, and they behave differently than other characters. And those characters are really interesting, and they're kind of teachers for us, because some people are screaming and crying and terrified, and there are people who are just something else. And we're kind of, I don't know if we're in training to become that, because that implies something, but the opportunity to become that is available to everyone, no matter what your circumstances are. And I would venture to say, the worse the circumstance, the more real life appears to you, and the more this opportunity to become who you are avails itself. And that's very valuable. So we judge it as like that's the worst thing that could ever happen. For some psyches, it's the best thing that could happen, even though it's horrible. Again, I'm a storyteller, I'm a writer, so when I write, I try to point those things out as a writer, because every movie that you see is trying to show you how to triumph over some kind of adversity, how to give yourself to love or selflessness or courage or kill the dragon or whatever it is. All stories are trying to do that. But what you're really trying to do is to find the thing in yourself that's hard to find. And we all have an opportunity to do it. And the best way to find that self is to get really quiet and to let go of the power that you give the world to have dominion over you. And you can begin to find not dominion over the world, but you can find this place in which the world has arisen. And that's a powerful place, and it's yourself. It's this consciousness that's within. And it's beautiful. And we're all heading there. We're all on that ride. This spiritual path, the stuff we're talking about in this class, is all about that. So if you're on the journey to hear this stuff, it helps. If you're not hearing this stuff, something will either force you or lead you to that, or you'll just leave as you entered. And does it make a difference to the greater power? I don't think so. But does it make a difference to your journey? Yeah, big difference.
So you don't really believe that who we are, it was given to us, we can influence it?
To some degree.
Some degree.
You can influence how you react to what's
Right.
been given.
Yeah.
That's free will in a way. And yes, you have that. And you can, you're born under circumstances. You've got a female body this time, you've got the world you were born into, the conditions you're born into, there you are. Nothing you can do about that. But how you deal with that, you can figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I believe that really, that we are just a form of energy which changes when we are on this earth, and then when we're gone, we're still here, but we are in a different form of energy.
well, a few weeks ago I would have said, well, that sounds right. Now I'd say it's a story. That's a story. It makes you feel good. You may be right, but I don't. I think it's a story.
I
I think it's less. I think it's nothing. I don't think it comes down to that at all. But that feels good, and we can live our life thinking that. Oh, it's energy. I called it computer code. Blanche called it energy. My kids call it's love. I go, whatever name you give it is the name you choose to give it because it makes you feel better. But I don't know that any of it holds up. And I'm here to start to quash every belief system to bring you back to something that has no anything other than what you choose it to be. There may be an underlying something that exists in manifested form. Like I said, there's the Ten Commandments, there are rules, there probably are certain truths that work in this particular configuration of the universe, but they will not hold up in the end. I don't believe, because it all goes back to poof. completely. Anyone else?
I find myself caught up in the worldly stuff. And when I move forward sometime, when I feel I let go a little bit, I also notice, and still kind of powerless over not getting back to it and not in reinforcing, like, putting negative stuff inside. And so what's a good way to find balance between, dealing with the outside world and also...
Well, again, it's kind of what I talk about regularly, which is sit still, take a breath, find a space that is not locked into the drama, that just steps away for a little bit of time. And just feel the presence of that state, which is not caught, which is not engaged, which is not trapped by the stuff you believe. Now, the minute you let go of that breath, that stuff can come back. It has hooks, literally just like Velcro, And so it goes, and you're caught in it again. And so how do you let go of Velcro? You pull it apart like that, taking off those little hooks until they're separate. And then the opportunity, and we all give ourselves that opportunity regularly, or the universe does, it just goes back again. Finally, something in you goes, I don't want to do that anymore. And you let it go. You let go of those hooks, and they don't grab you anymore. But you have to stay somewhat vigilant. You have to stay present and aware. And then what happens is you see, oh, there's that hook rising up. It's now doing it in slow motion, as opposed to like that, where it's too fast to deal with. You see it coming up, and you can just go, and it falls away. You just disengage it. You don't engage. You just let it go, and it falls away, and you find yourself with enormous power to let go of the things that get you over and over. And then you'll start to see very clearly the ones that you don't want to let go of. Like often with a partner, there's a certain thing they do. Blanche often is late for things. That still, 50 years later, grabs me. It's like, and I can't, I'm starting to, kind of. Letting go of that before it rises up. So I'm not walking around angry with that thing. Because it's not going to change. Being angry is just, it's a kind of condition that I kind of like. I kind of like that. I don't know why. It reinforces something that makes me feel big, better, more, whatever. But it's not healthy. It's not good. And so you can go and not engage it. And then everything is much simpler. But we engage old patterns because they identify us, because they're a form, because we believe in those patterns, and they define us. And because we believe we are who we are, we seek those patterns out to reinforce this identity that we have. The incredible thing about great spiritual practice is finally that identity evaporates. But you don't evaporate, because you're still here as this. The room, the space, the other people in your life, the TV, the global warming, it's all still there. Whether it's personal or not personal, it's there. Now what? How do you live with that in your life? And the stories that are filtering through all of that, because it's all also built on story. So how do you then take a breath and let go of the fact that today it's raining? I mean, there are a lot of people who woke up this morning and said, I can go to class, or I can stay home because it's raining. And they gave themselves a story. Oh, it's raining, it's going to be terrible. Of course, it wasn't that terrible. But they chose not to pursue this. Each one of you who's here woke up and you saw it raining and you didn't care. Or if you did care, you said, I'm not going to let that stop me. And so you got in your car and you drove to this. You made this choice inside yourself to move through discomfort into something that would allow you to take a breath and feel free. And so whatever that mechanism is that brought you here is a mechanism you have inside you for every aspect of your life, and ultimately it liberates. It frees you from your very annoying, ultimately very debilitating story. But it's not over when it's over. That's the thing it's so important. Awakening and enlightenment and freeing yourself of you is not the end. It's just another version, another dimension of this same thing. Only it's more graduate school, it's more in your face, it's really powerful, and the lessons learned are full of great wisdom, which ultimately come down to fairly simple things, which, make me feel like an idiot because, I'm selling you on the stupidest idea in the world, that there's nothing here. And for certain people, that's like, oh my God, thank you, sir. But that's meaningless. You would go to India to have people tell you there's nothing here. You'd spend a fortune. You live in an ashram for 40 years trying to hear there's nothing here. It's nothing, And those people you'd think are the most incredible people who ever lived. But they don't. They just know something that you haven't allowed yourself to know. Don't get caught up in those stories. Don't feel so drawn to the drama of your life. You have a choice. Take a breath and say no. Watch this thing come into being and just don't grab it. And that's the road to liberation. We done? Okay. Thank you, guys. Do it the third time.